Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Why so serious? Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 557 for October 19th, 2023. And I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. A big welcome back to Brendan Cassidy. Yeah,
hello, friends.
Brendan.
Hello,
is
friends.
back after a lovely wedding. We talked about this briefly on the Wes Anderson review that we just did, but in case you missed that, I was in Philadelphia last weekend.
You were to see me put on some more jewelry.
Exactly. To see Brendan's awesome wedding. I got to meet his lovely bride. It was a beautiful party. We had a great time. And I came back and Brendan, of course, wasn't available for the main show. So I got a guest. I brought on Dave Giannini, our editor-in-chief.
Oh,
and man, he was
Dave,
passionate about Martin Scorsese. He loved talking Marty. It was a great time.
Well, who isn't passionate about Martin Scorsese?
That is
he
true.
Might be the greatest living American filmmaker right now. I mean, I feel like that argument can be made.
I mean, I would argue that a lot of people aren't passionate about Martin Scorsese, and here's my evidence. There are so-called journalists in our country, people that have access, that have a privilege to sit down with a living legend. And you know what they ask him, Brendan?
What do you think of Marvel movies?
What do you think about Who cares? You're sitting down with a living legend and you're asking him about dumb fluff? Get out of here. Those are not serious people.
They're not. No, that's clickbaity. That's what's prevalent nowadays, and that's the problem with journalistic integrity or the lack thereof nowadays.
Yeah, look,
because
I
you're
understand.
You're talking to one of the greats who has made some of the greatest movies of all time. You're better off just asking him about Goodfellas once again.
Yes, like at least there's merit to that. It might be an old road. Maybe that's been walked before. But hey, Goodfellas is one of Scorsese's better movies. It's one of the best movies of the
it's a
90s.
Martin Scorsese movie. That's what matters.
Exactly. And it's one people love. At least that's on topic. You get the privilege. I would give anything to sit down with Marty for just 5 minutes or hell, 60 seconds just to hear his perspective on cinema in the world. And you're asking
I would love to hear his
about
perspective on the
Marvel?
King of Comedy.
Yes. I would pay money just to have that 60 seconds to tell him, hey, the King of Comedy, I don't care that it was a bomb at the time. That is one of your best films, and in my opinion, it is your best film.
I'm with you. I think it's my favorite film.
Remarkable. I just want to reassure him because there was that TikTok that went viral. His daughter did a TikTok and people were pointing out that he is still a little snake bitten by that film bombing, as he noted in that TikTok. And it was a funny little moment. So I just want 60 seconds to let him know that it's great. Give me that opportunity, because a lot of these other journalists, they don't get it.
You know, we often talk about films that we would love to see get the quote-unquote Criterion treatment. The King of Comedy needs it. That is going to be on the collection at some point, because it was such a bomb that is then found an audience because of how surprisingly predictive it was about the world of entertainment. And the script is so good. Paul D. Zimmerman, his name was, who only wrote like 3 movies, including some episodes, Sesame Street of all things, I think. And then he passed away before he could get doing any prominent work. But that script is so good for the movie.
It
is. That is a very predictive and ahead of its time film.
Very.
I would love to talk about that for like 5 hours.
I know. We've talked about the King of Comedy quite a few times here on the show. Dave and I
Yeah.
got into it a little bit last week in our
Mhm.
little retrospective. It was really less a retrospective. I think we set out to do one, and it just ended up becoming a 40-minute dialogue on why we love Martin Scorsese and why he's the best American filmmaker of all time. I mean, it mostly came down to that.
Well, of course, you're going to cite specific films to, convince people of your argument, and there the retrospective kind of becomes part of the conversation,
Yeah,
just in a more indirect way. But like Martin Scorsese is someone that needs no introduction, right?
exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's one of the best, and I hope he keeps making movies for another 20 years. And I
Yeah.
cannot wait to see Killers of the Flower Moon.
Same.
My wife and my son have decided to have their birthdays on the worst weekend. I hope they're not listening.
You got to
but,
choose family or Scorsese.
Yeah, it's tough.
To choose Scorsese.
By the time you're listening to this, my family and I will be in Walt Disney World. We will be right smack dab in the middle of our vacation when this episode goes live. Unless I get delayed, then it might go up whenever I get back. Who knows? We'll see.
Wow.
We'll see how it goes. The plan is to get this up, though, on our normal time. And if that's the case, hello, I'm probably in Hollywood Studios or somewhere. But
Man, I keep forgetting it's Hollywood Studios. I haven't been to Disney in so long. I still see it as MGM Studios.
Yep, no, Hollywood Studios. I think that's the plan for Monday. I don't know. We'll see. Either way, I'll be at Walt Disney World.
Good for you, man.
So their birthdays are they actually just happened, but we always go to Disney World for their birthdays.
Yeah.
And it's just bad timing because Killers of the Flower Moon is coming out this weekend, which means I won't get to it for some time, for a few days. I might not get to it until a week after its release.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
I'm going to try and see it this weekend. Does I almost said my fiance. I mean, my wife.
Your wife?
I have to get used to that.
Your wife?
Yeah, man, we've got a lot of celebrating going on here in the InSession Film family. You've got 2 birthdays to celebrate in your family, and then I just married. Look, yeah, for those watching on YouTube, I got the literal jewelry here. My finger is a lot heavier now. But my wife and her friend Carmen, who is also her maid of honor, they're going to see Taylor Swift The Eras tour.
Of course, yes.
Of course, and I'm hearing great things about it. I actually might not mind checking it out myself at some point.
Sure.
But while I do that, because the film seems to be pretty long from what I understand, I might take some time and go and see the new Scorsese in the middle of that. So this way we can kill as many birds with one stone by doing so.
You might as well do that at the same time, and you'll get out of the cinema at the same time.
Well, it becomes a double-edged thing because they're going to see the film in downtown Philly, and right nearby is an independent theater that is playing an early showing of Fincher's The Killer. So it's like, do I go with the new Scorsese because it's more widely available, or do I try and do I try and get the Killer while I'm in the city at the same? Maybe I'll just see 2 movies. I'll make Saturday a movie day for me.
You might as well go see The Killer because look, David Fincher, we're going to talk about him. That's a great transition.
That's what I'm trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah, I'm trying to transition to another topic.
Transition to what we're going to be talking about on this episode because we are going to be doing a little bit of Fincher retrospective, but we're going to be doing this a little differently than what we did last week with Martin Scorsese. We're going to tackle Fincher the same way we did Barbenheimer earlier this year when we ranked collectively Nolan's films with Gerwig as well. Yeah. So in this exercise, we'll talk about David Fincher's films, of course, but the idea is that Brendan and I will come to a consensus ranking on Fincher. Yeah. So that is going to be how we'll tackle Fincher in the back half of the episode. Before we get into that, though, I do want to circle back to last week's episode slightly because there was some rather important news that dropped, at least I thought, regarding A24. And Dave and I had a really fun conversation regarding the A24 news, but I wanted to get your thoughts as well, Brennan, because we've talked about A24 a lot over the years.
Yeah.
Not just the films themselves, but the studio, how they've evolved. So the news, of course, being that they're going into the realm of IP as a way to get more income, because as we know, the current model, unsustainable. We've talked about that so many times here on the show over the years. We know that.
Aside from a small handful of films that have done very well, like in Everything Everywhere All at Once. But look at how many films that have been either distributed or produced by A24. You can't always bank on an Everything Everywhere All at Once, right?
Exactly. And Dave and I did talk about that Everything Everywhere All at Once, Moonlight, Hereditary, a few of those big ones up at the top that grossed, let's say, $65 million and more. Those films have funded so many movies that lost money.
Yeah.
So many more movies that lost money. And it's interesting because at one point in the conversation, I threw out, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 different films to Dave that I love from A24 that I would consider the best films of their given year. And every single one of them grossed less than $4 million worldwide, not just domestically. So, a lot of their movies just don't make money, and and we know that. So they have to move into the world of IP, or at least they need to come up with a plan to make more money. That's their plan. Brendan, what say you?
I'm going to say something pretty controversial here, but I think this news kind of reveals something that really bothers me nowadays. But there are some, I'm not going to say who, but there are some film critics and journalists out there that are just beyond insufferable. Absolutely insufferable.
Yes.
Because all they do when they hear news like this is they jump to conclusions before they know any of the facts. All we know with this, and you and Dave talked about this wonderfully on episode 556. 556, right? That was the episode number, I think? Yeah, absolutely. Yep. You talked about this very well. At this point now, all we know is that A24 wants to tap into IP and maybe a little bit of franchise films, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We don't know what that means. We have no idea what that means.
Nope.
So we see so many people get butthurt over this, like, oh, my independent studio will not be making independent films anymore. We don't know that. They might still be making the Spring Breakers of the world.
Well, they said that. They came out and said that they still want to continue to make the movies that they've always championed. The problem is, and Dave articulated this very well, you need money to do that.
Well, the other thing too is
movies cost money.
What does IP really mean? Like what do they talk about when they say, they being A24, when they're going to start tackling some IP? Because we did hear that they were in a bidding war with the Halloween franchise against Miramax, and they ultimately lost out on that.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, I actually think the Halloween franchise could do very well with an A24 studio backing it.
Oh my gosh!
But what does IP really mean for them? Because this is why I feel like people jump to conclusions too much. Because when we see the words IP, we automatically think, oh God, is A24 going to start doing Marvel movies? Are they going to start doing Star Wars movies? Which they obviously can't, because the rights are just not there for them to be able to tackle that. And I'm sure there's no money in the world for them to be able to make that happen. But that's the mindset that people go to. When in actuality, what if A24 has like their own Mad Max franchise to back? Like that would be kind of awesome, right?
I agree.
And they seem to be spearheading that already with Talk to Me, because of how successful that was. They already have a sequel for that one announced. So they might try and create their own little like universes of sorts. There's nothing wrong with that.
2, can't wait.
I mean, as long as A24 is doing it, I trust they have a reason for it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this approach I mean, if it's going to make them money, sure. That's not really the reason, though. We at least, I feel like A24 would only do this if they can at least maintain their existing artistic integrity. And I doubt they're going to be losing that. Like I said earlier, they were in a bidding war with the Halloween franchise, or with Miramax for the Halloween franchise. I can see that franchise doing very well with A24. I could see a few horror franchises doing very well with A24. I can see them tackling maybe certain novels by maybe certain authors. I see them tackling Stephen King novels and doing really interesting things with them. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's really funny how you and Dave, when you first brought up this topic, immediately went into a conversation on elevated horror, even though that wasn't part of the conversation at all.
But it's so synonymous that
it is.
You can't help it. Yeah.
You can't help it. Yeah, I think you guys had wonderful things to say about the problem with elevated horror as a phrase, as a concept, as a definition. And I don't want to get too much into that, because I think what you said in episode 5 to 56 was great and very worth listening to. So all of our listeners out there, if you want my own thought, just listen to what Dave and BD had to say about it. I think they talked about it beautifully. But as far as A24 tackling IP, I don't have a problem with it. And mostly because we don't really know what that IP is. But if it's anything like the Halloween franchise, I mean, it's certainly got to be more interesting than what David Gordon Green was doing, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. Like, regardless of whatever they get their hands on, whether it be The Exorcist, which I jokingly alluded to, it'd be nice if they could somehow get that away from David Gordon Green before they make the next few.
As someone who has seen The Exorcist believer, I will back you up on that.
Yeah, or maybe they get the Conjuring franchise, reboot that, or Paranormal Activity, whatever it is, they're going to be able to do it in a new and different way. And I don't think that it will exclusively be however you want to label A24 style. I'm not even going to say the word. It's stupid. It's stupid. It's stupid. It's dumb. It's so dumb. Not going to say the word. But the A24 style, however you want to call that, I don't think that whatever this new venture is going to be, I don't think it's going to be that. I think it'll still be thoughtful. There'll be artistry behind the movies, but they're going to make these as accessible as they can. That's the whole point of IP, is you make these broad movies that are compelling, entertaining, and will make a lot of money. And one presumes that they're going to put marketing behind these. And that's the one thing that they don't really do a whole lot of. But one presumes they'll put some marketing behind these, make some money, so that way they can make the next Spring Breakers or whatever. The
or
next
Swiss Army
Lady
Man or
Bird,
something like that.
Swiss Army Man, whatever the case may be. That's, they want to keep championing those kind of movies, but they need money to do so, as is the case with every business. So this makes a lot of sense. So I don't think we have to be trepidatious about them taking a franchise that is antithetical to the reputation that comes with A24. I think they're going to make it broadly very appealing, but better than, let's say, what the traditional studios would do. And that to me is exciting. I like, you because I mentioned the Conjuring franchise is a great example of what I mean. That first Conjuring, I think, is great. It's very good. And that, I think, is the perfect middle ground of A24, their style, with what a broad studio film can be. Like, I think that first one meshes that very well, because it does have broad appeal. It's something that everyone can go and enjoy, but there is craft and thoughtfulness put into that movie that the sequels don't really have.
I kind of like I kind of like The Conjuring too.
I know you like the second one. You and I will go back and forth on that. However, the consensus broadly is that the rest of that franchise, it doesn't come close to the heights of that first one.
No.
And honestly, that
That's
is
fair.
maybe the reputation for a lot of horror franchises. So like that's where I think A24, would be great. And honestly, Talk to Me is a little bit of that same thing, right? Like
Well, I
Talk
was
to
gonna
Me is
yeah.
it
Yeah.
has that A24 thoughtfulness into it, but that is also a broad movie that a lot of people
Well,
will like. And I think that
it
speaks to
yeah,
why it did so well.
it does have an energy to it, like we talked about, that kind of breaks away from the A24 isms, if you want to call it that. It does
Yeah.
kind of have an almost 80s horror energy in some ways that I found kind of interesting, as if to say like they were using that film to test the waters and what they can do with existing horror IP specifically, which is why if they were to tackle, let's say, a Halloween or a Nightmare on Elm Street, which is that I think could actually fit into their wheelhouse in a really
That would be fun.
interesting way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think it's safe to assume that when they try and do a little bit of IP work here, it's probably going to fall within the horror genre in some way. And that's, I guess,
Yeah.
really only given the evidence that they were in a bidding war with Miramax following guys. So it kind of played their cards a little as to maybe what their agenda was. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it could even be a good thing, right? Especially given the around, God forbid, elevated horror, right? Maybe the best way for A24 to get away from that narrative is to start making slasher films and just make very good slasher films. Like that is totally a possibility for them.
I agree. Selfishly speaking, I would love for A24 to get their hands on Transformers. What do they got to do to make that happen? Universal, let it go.
What the heck? That seems weird. Just
well, look,
I
know it doesn't make sense, but let's be honest. Universal has been dropping the ball. They're
A24 distributed Rise of the Beasts.
Yeah. Imagine Optimus Prime in the hands of Robert Eggers. How amazing would that be?
Transported back to Elizabethan times, giving a philosophical speech about how the neighboring village has this haunted goat that scared him.
Yes, imagine Optimus Prime, and I'm trying to think of the time period. The 1800s, 1700s, 1800s, but with Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe at a lighthouse having a conversation.
That seems
I'm telling you, it could work. I think it could work.
I don't know if it could work, but I want to see it.
I want to see it too. Look,
now, in all seriousness, that's not the kind of IP I want to see them try. But like the way that you talk about that, it's like that just now I need to see that movie. No,
it's silly and ridiculous, and it's not going to happen. But Universal has been dropping the ball significantly when it comes to that franchise. And I'm just saying,
well,
if they want to let it go, A24 can scoop that up and make something really good out of it.
You're making a good point. It's something we talk about a lot with regard to Disney, right? And how often we see these announcements for new live action adaptations, right? And it's for films that are like, this was a huge hit 4 years ago. It's like Moana and Tangled and The Princess and the Frog, which is a little bit older to be fair, but I mean, we always say if you want to do these Disney live action adaptations, Disney should be targeting the animated films that weren't successes. That didn't
The
work
Iron Giant. Oh man, that has A24 written all over it.
I'm fine with Brad Bird's version, honestly. But it's like the point I'm making is Disney should be tackling movies like The Sword and the Stone, for instance, right? The Black Cauldron, the ones that didn't work, that maybe need to be updated again. And that's where I think A24 could actually have a play in this by targeting franchises that need work if they're able to do that. And again, we're hypothesizing, like that's what we think they might do, but I don't know for sure. But that's what I would hope they would at least do.
Well, my only pushback to that, and I just wonder because of what we've seen this year in terms of major franchises, underperforming based on expectations, because with something like the Black Cauldron, I don't know if there's any nostalgia for that outside of a few. Of course, there are always people that will like it, but to turn that into a live action movie, that would simply come down to marketing, not nostalgia. And I feel like that's a flip of the coin. That just depends on how much Disney would put into that. How good is the marketing? And even if it's good, because we've seen movies with good marketing and they still underperform. So it's a little bit like the idea of what you're saying, I agree with, wholly agree with. But at the same time, there has to be some sort of draw. And I just wonder where A24 would draw the line, because I think that artistically they're going to be thinking along those lines as far as picking something that has room for interpretation. There's something artistic there. We can make that, we can make that fit our mold, but is there going to be a draw? And the whole point of this is to make money. Like we have to pick something. We're going to make it good, but we have to also market it. And if there's not enough of a nostalgic draw, maybe they reach for something bigger.
That's why Halloween made sense, right?
That's why Halloween kind of fit perfect sense.
That fit both of those spectrums that you're talking about. It still has a draw.
Like The Conjuring.
Yeah, which is why they'll probably do this with horror, at least to start off.
Horror makes sense to begin with.
It does. But I think there's a lot of room to play there that they can have a little bit of fun with. And like I said, they probably need to do that just to get away from the whole elevated horror narrative that they found themselves kind of in whole to showcase a different side of horror that can still be good. Just because a horror movie takes itself seriously, that doesn't mean it's better than other horror films.
I also wonder about resources, because if you're going to pick something that is non-horror, a horror movie you can make rather, pretty effectively. I don't want to say cheap, but effectively, comparatively to, let's say, a $200 million Marvel movie. I don't know if A24 has those kinds of resources. So, I say Transformers jokingly, although I would love that if Universal's listening. But I say it somewhat jokingly because even if they got their hands on Transformers, do they have $200 million to make a huge Transformers? I don't know. Maybe they do. I don't know. But it's just a question that I'm posing, because I think of if we're shifting to non-horror franchises, I don't think it'll be something as big as Transformers or Marvel or anything like that. Where they might fit the mold away from horror might be something like like John Wick. What is the next John Wick franchise? Like what's something in that vein they could do? Like maybe Bourne, like rebooting the Jason Bourne franchise or doing something along those lines. Or the Hunger Games, I could see them fitting there, but is that too big? Is that too CGI heavy? I don't know. But like
might be too recent. Lines. I don't know.
But something in that vein is what I mean.
Yeah. We won't know until they try and we hear the announcements of what IP they want to go after. But yeah, it's like I don't want us to jump to conclusions that are abandoning their ethos by doing this, because that is not what they're doing. And I feel like that has been the narrative that I've at least seen on X/Twitter, whatever. Twitter. I'm calling it Twitter still. I don't care what you have to say. Yeah. It's Twitter. It'll always be Twitter. But I feel like the narrative has been this sense of negativity that A24 is abandoning what made them A24 in the first place.
No.
And I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the case. At least we know. But I can at least assume that that's not going to be the case.
I don't think that's going to be the case. Even if they grabbed the most traditional, conventional, non-A24 franchise, whatever that is, Marvel, that would never work legally, but
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
think of like Star Wars, or like whatever it is, something that the biggest movie franchise that seems like it is the complete antithesis to A24, whatever it is, if they were to get their hands on it, I still think the final product would, in some way, shape, or form, still have that same thoughtful quality put into it.
I agree.
I think it'll bridge that gap, as I mentioned earlier. It'll have that thoughtfulness, but it'll be broad enough that everyone can enjoy it. They just want to make good movies. That's it. But they need to make good movies that have mass appeal because they need to make money.
Well, it's called a business model. It's called a business strategy.
business.
You have to have both of those,
Yeah.
both of those
we knew
characteristics
this
in
was
order to be
coming.
successful. Because if you don't have that, then a couple of years from now, we won't be getting any more A24 movies at all.
No. What I'd really like to see as well, this will never happen. This is just wishful thinking on my end. But we talked about these films not that long ago, earlier in the year. I revisited this franchise. We dedicated a whole episode to it. But you think of something like Pirates of the Caribbean and how that was lightning in a bottle.
We're going
Okay, that
route.
is lightning in a
That's
bottle.
a franchise that.
And look, I'm not even
help.
I'm not even saying that it has to be pirates, but it is evident that Disney wants to keep making movies based off of theme park rides or other subsidiaries they have. Maybe instead of you doing it, Disney, maybe just, pass it off. You hire a company to come in and do it for you.
Yeah.
And that's where A24 can be like, all right, we'll take Haunted Mansion off your hands.
At the very least, I would just love to see A24 tackle an adventure / swashbuckler like that. And when they say they're going to tackle IP, from what I understand, I need to go back and reference the article. That doesn't only mean they're tackling existing IP, right? They could be, kind of spearheading, or at least attempting to spearhead their own franchises, right? Have their own kind of trilogies of sorts. It doesn't have to be trilogies, but that's just an example. Which in and of itself becomes IP if they become hits, right?
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of vagueness on what they define as IP in this whole conversation, which is why I don't think we should be jumping to conclusions yet. Needless to say, I am intrigued by what they try to do with this.
No, I think we have somewhat of an idea simply based off the fact that they were close to getting the Halloween franchise.
Yeah.
Okay, so that tells me that they're going after maybe just in the horror realm, but big horror franchises. I mean, there are very few that are bigger than Halloween, if any. So they're at least in that game as far as franchises that are already existing and thriving. But you're right that there's probably other content, popular books, what's a Hunger Games equivalent, a novel that could be huge that they could tap into and make a lot of money. Like maybe something along those lines.
Yeah.
Or whatever the next John Wick is. Where's that? What could that be? Like my guess is that's kind of where they're just surveying the landscape at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. They have an interesting future. I think they do.
All right, Brennan, let's talk about coffee. It's our favorite drink in the world.
I need it now.
It's something that we all live on. Our world just crumbles without coffee. But that's why we love Coffee Cult, because they source the best coffee, specialty grade Arabica coffee beans, the top 2% specialty coffee in the world. I mean, we're talking about the elite of the elite here. It's all about quality. They don't use any defects to cheapen the beans. They don't use Robusta beans to cheapen the product. It is all about the top 2% specialty coffees in the world. They roast to order, so your coffee isn't stale. It's not sitting in a warehouse or on a store shelf. It is roasted fresh, shipped to you directly, guaranteeing that every bag you get is extremely fresh. And they have
Absolutely.
all kinds of great coffee. They got single origin coffees from around the world. They got some great blends if you're a medium roast, dark roast. They have a Thunderbolt blend if you like really dark French roast style coffee.
Yeah.
For those that live in cooler climates, I'm jealous of you. Maybe you want to try the Road Dog. That is great for those cool, crisp mornings, or maybe the Sumatra is fantastic.
That sounds I mean, I'm an avid defender of the Sumatra already, as you know. But what
Yeah.
you're talking about there, the other one, that sounds perfect for the
good.
fall here in Pennsylvania.
Indeed. So go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K. Coffeecult.com. Use our code ISF. Again, that code is ISF, and you'll get 15% off your order. So again, go to coffeecult.com. Use our code ISF for 15% off. You're going to love it. Coffeecult.com. All right, Brandon, the InSession Film Store. We need to talk about it.
I need to get a better look at that shirt of yours there, baby. Oh, look at that beauty. Look at that beauty.
Little Michael Shannon here. And
oh, look at that. Look at that little
always worry
midnight
about you,
special
that's
right
the deal.
there.
Yeah, so we got midnight special shirts available. I'll always worry about you. That's the deal. You definitely want to go and check that out. We got a new shirt out there inspired by our conversation of La La Land here on the show. The best thing that
Yeah.
ever happened to La La Land is that it lost Best Picture to Moonlight. That's what the t-shirt says. It's one of my
that's a good
faves,
point.
so definitely go and check that out. We have Barbie inspired t-shirts up there. We got Star Wars inspired. We have hashtag JD Tears, Women in Session, all kinds of fun designs up there. There's a couple more we're working on that we'll hope to get up there pretty soon. So go to InSessionFilm.com/store. That's where you can find all of our products. Or you can head on over to TeePublic, tpublic.com/store/InSessionFilm. You can find our store directly there on TeePublic. And of course, these designs don't just come on t-shirts. You can get mugs, pillows, pins, magnets, stickers, all kinds of fun things. All of that is available there on TeePublic. So either go to InSessionFilm.com/store. We have all that there as well, or just TeePublic.com/stores/InSessionFilm. Go check it out and look your best this fall season.
Look snazzy. Look snazzy.
All right, with that, let's talk about David Fincher.
Who's
Great
he?
filmmaker. We really like him. I like him anyway. A lot of people tend to love his movies. He has a new movie out called The Killer that will get a limited to release this weekend. So many of us, at least here in South Florida, I don't think we get it this weekend unless there's a press screening. Actually, you know what? I missed the press screening last week, and I have my son to blame for that one because it was his birthday and he wouldn't let me go. Could you believe that?
I thought you were about to blame the guy who just got married.
no. And you know what? It's not even just Sam. It's Brandy, because I had a press screening on the next day for Priscilla, and I missed that because it was her birthday. Can you believe those two?
You missed both
How
Fincher and
selfish
Sofia
of them.
Coppola. Wow.
I'm just
Oof.
kidding. I had a great
Now,
time.
now,
celebrating
now I
their
feel
birthdays,
bad. Now I feel bad saying that The Killer, Fincher's latest, is playing in downtown Philly. I might get the chance to see it this weekend.
Yeah, I remember you saying that, and that's why I think you should go. At least one of us can get a chance to see it. I'm sure I'll get it soon. It's getting a limited release this weekend, so we thought that, hey, let's talk about David Fincher. He's a unique little filmmaker that a lot of people really love. As we noted up at the top of the episode, though, Brendan and I are going to do a consensus ranking. We're going to do this similar to what we did with Nolan and Gerwig earlier in the year. Yeah. So, shall we go in release order?
Let's do that. Yeah, let's do release order, because that's how we did Barbenheimer, which was really more or less a Nolan tier list.
Nolan sort of Gerwig.
with
her
a few
3 films.
Gerwig films that ended up kind of topping the list anyway.
Yeah,
At
exactly.
least Little Women did for
yeah.
both of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, let's go in release order. I think that could make things pretty interesting. I think we should also reiterate, if we haven't done so already, that there is an existing movie series of David Fincher's on
Ryan and Jay.
InSessionFilm.com. Yeah, Ryan and Jay back during the Extra Film Days did a David Fincher movie series, and many of those series, JD, you and I would kind of offer some thoughts on the films that they talked about during the main shows on those same weekends. So what we say about these films might not necessarily be new to listeners of our podcast who have been with us for a while, right?
Sure. Yep.
Which means we probably could be a vague with how we talk about these films. Really, the exercise here is, do you and I agree?
Yeah, that's the fun of this. I agree.
Yeah.
For new listeners of the show, we have talked about these over the years. As Brendan mentioned, there's a whole movie series. Brendan and I have commented on them. You can find a lot of that at InSessionFilm.com. And we'll still talk about them briefly here as we go. But yeah, this will be a fun way to redo the Fincher discussion, if you will.
Absolutely.
So we'll see where Brendan and I come. I know with some of these we'll very much agree, and some of them I think are kind of in the air. I'm curious to see where this goes. I think there will be more disparity here than we did with Nolan.
I think so. I think there are at least 2 or 3 films where we might find ourselves going back and forth on.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's start with everyone's favorite Alien film, Alien 3.
Hey, it's Fincher's favorite film he's ever done too, right?
I agree. Yeah, I don't think he's disowned that at all.
No. If you bring this up in an interview, he is not going to be pissed.
Yeah, definitely not. So where do you stand on Alien 3? Obviously, this being the first, it's at the top of the list. So
it's number 1. Yeah, it's number 1 on the list right now.
Number 1 as we stand. But what do you think of Alien 3?
I think it's kind of an interesting movie, man. I really do. I think between Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3, you have a solid trilogy. I really do. I think in many ways is kind of the Terminator 3 of this specific franchise.
Yes, I agree.
A film that had some trouble, maybe not as much trouble as Alien 3, given the reputation that David Fincher now has in the Hollywood sphere. But it definitely felt like it was tampered with. Now, if you watch the assembly cut, you could definitely really get a sense of a great movie in there. Not just a good movie, but a great movie in there that's not quite fully present. But I do think this works as a really interesting conclusion to the Ripley arc.
Yes.
Something that Alien Resurrection, that's a movie apparently. I don't remember that one.
I don't believe that exists. No.
I don't want to get sidetracked, but that's a movie that should have worked. That's a movie that should have been more interesting than it was.
Yeah.
But I don't think Alien 3 is that bad. I don't think it's one of Fincher's best films. I'll say this right now. It is not my least favorite Fincher film. But I do think it's a pretty interesting Alien film. It might be my 3rd favorite Alien film. I've come to appreciate Covenant more than you as I've gotten older. So I tend to go back and forth between Alien 3 and Alien Covenant as what's my 3rd favorite Alien film. But I do think this is a really fascinating failure of a movie. And I like what Fincher was trying to go for here.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. This is not last on my list. I do like the film. It is extremely flawed. There are details that are overlooked that are sometimes very frustrating from a narrative perspective or from a character perspective, and some of it are these small subtle things that you just can't help but laugh at. For example, I can't remember the character's name, but there's one moment where he stands up and says something to the effect of, we should trust Ripley's leadership. We need to follow her. And then in the next scene, he's like questioning her. It's like, what are we doing here?
Which could be an interesting idea, but there's no context to define that. Right?
Nothing that makes sense of that. Exactly. or like the egg ending up on the ship. Like there's just no answers to it. Like sometimes it's small, insignificant things that are just funny, but there are larger issues to the film that should have been addressed that became victim of the film's production hell. But I agree with you as it relates to Ripley and crystallizing her arc. There's enough things there that I do think are effective. That I do really like the ambition of what it's going for. I do like the film on the whole. It is flawed, but fascinatingly flawed. And I don't think he should disown
I'm with
it.
you.
I don't think he needs to.
No. Well, I get why he does, because it's clearly not the film he wanted to make.
Not
It was his
the one
first.
he wanted, but still.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I get why from a personal standpoint, because he experienced it, right? And he would not want to relive this experience.
And that's very fair. Yes.
Yeah. But it's not a bad movie. It's an interesting one. We need failures like this that are interesting, that are trying to challenge the fans of this franchise, right? And not just this franchise, but any franchise. And I like that he's at least attempting to do that.
Yes, I agree. All right, let's move on to his second film. This one really put him on the map. It is, of course, 1995's Seven.
Yeah.
A film that many still consider to be his best or one of his very best. Brendan, where do you sit on Seven?
Oh, we have a new number one on our list.
We got a new number one, yes. doesn't take much there to beat Alien.
It doesn't take much. I feel like we're at the point now where we're not going to be disagreeing on anything until we get to, I don't know what film it'll be. But Seven's not that film. I think this film is, I think this film is great. It's weird. We often talk about comparisons a lot, right? How we sometimes see a film, we want to try and compare it to something else to try and define how good it is, right? And I feel like Seven gets compared a lot to The Silence of the Lambs, which I sort of get, but the movie I often think about when comparing Seven to anything else is Blade Runner. And like, because there's something weirdly dystopian about it. It's always got this rainy backdrop until the very end when everything is clear as day, and that's kind of the most ironic time to have everything so crystal clear and beautiful when the most unbeautiful thing is about to happen.
Yeah, love that irony. That's good stuff there.
I do too, but the sense of place here feels very dystopian, very raw, very dilapidated, very ugly. It's a film that it urges you to feel sick to your stomach, which means I don't often watch it. but I will say, if I ever encounter a friend of mine who loves movies and wants a good thriller and they've never seen this movie, boy, am I going to show them this one, and I'm going to be watching their expression the entire way, especially during that sloth scene. Oh, God, that'll be seared into my brain forever.
Yes. Oh, my God.
Yeah, it's a very good film. In many ways, Fincher's unofficial debut of sorts, because this really is the first Fincher-esque Fincher film.
True introduction to Fincher. For sure.
Yeah, it's very good. I think it's one of his best.
I agree. No, I'm completely with you. It's extremely dark. It's creepy. The psychological terror at the core of this film is absolutely remarkable. And I love how much of its sinister qualities through a lot of the film linger quietly. Like, this is a film that is more methodical and quiet than I think its reputation would suggest, because you think of its more horrific moments, such as the aforementioned sloth scene or what we see at the end with the box.
Yeah.
This is a film that, while uncompromising, takes its time in some ways. It really lets those sinister qualities breathe. And I think that's why it's ultimately very affecting, especially when you consider these performances. Do you like, where does this rank among Brad Pitt's career as far as performance goes? Is this top 3?
No, I don't know if it's top 3 for me. There are other performances of his I think I prefer. If I have any, I don't want to say knock, but if I have any questions about the film, I sometimes go back to his performance in the very end of Seven, and I think, are there? I don't know. Because I've never been through what that character goes through to know if that performance is as accurate as it could be. But there are other performances from Brad Pitt I think I might put above this, but that's not to disregard the performance he's giving here. I think where it's at its best is when he's at his most cocky, and then how that's juxtaposed by the almost like this cynicism when he and Somerset some time to just simply talk about their respective morals and how they play into this mystery at hand. And there's also the moment that they have with Tracy, Mills's wife, and how she plays into that dynamic as well. I think in those moments, Brad Pitt is wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
Well, a little disparity then here, even on 7, and maybe this could impact where the film ultimately lies in our overall ranking at the end.
Okay.
Because I do think this is one of Brad Pitt's best. I don't know where it ranks. I don't know if it's top 3. It probably.
Well, that was the question. I really
me.
like his performance here, but yeah, I mentioned top 3, and I think, man, I love him in Ocean's 11. I love him in his small role in Thelma and Louise. I really love as well. He's a good actor. He's a Moneyball. I think he's really great in Moneyball.
Moneyball's great. Ad Astra is top 3 for me, hands down.
I will say I do prefer him here over Fight Club. I know we haven't talked about Fight Club yet, but and that's not to knock his performance on Fight Club. I don't want to play that trump card too early or anything like that, but I do like him a little bit more here than in Fight Club.
Yeah, and I'm posing the question. I didn't even wrestle with this coming into the conversation. I'm just curious. So thinking off the cuff here, Ad Astra I love. Moneyball certainly in the conversation. There's not too many that I would take over this. This worst case, it's top 5, but it might even be top 3 for me. And part of it, while I do agree with you about what comes before the ending, and I know that it's almost a meme now, the whole what's in the box, but I think his deterioration there upon that revelation is nothing short of horrifying and heartbreaking. The way he demonstrates fear and anxiety and disbelief is utterly devastating. I think it's quintessentially cathartic. And I don't know if he could have handled that moment any better, especially for where he was as an actor at that time. Maybe if you give him 25 more years of experience, perhaps he handles it differently. But I don't know if I need those years of experience to define that character in that moment. I wanted something raw and honest for someone, given his talent and where he was at that time, to convey what that character would in that moment. I think he was the perfect choice for that moment, and the distraught that he embellishes there is just it's perfect. It's perfection.
And maybe any questions I have about it are less on his performance and more so the overall tone that the film is evoking simultaneously. Like the way the music ramps up, Howard Shore's score there. It's just, and that's not a knock. It's just there's so many different conflicting tones happening that maybe it inadvertently conflates the performance into something that it's not. So it's a weird thing. Maybe that's part of it. It almost makes me want to see this film again, but witness the ending with no music whatsoever. I'd be curious to see how the impact lands. If I weirdly think it might even be more impactful, honestly.
Maybe,
yeah.
Well, and that that's where we could have a discussion about Fincher being, as you noted earlier, essentially a first-time filmmaker. At least first time getting to really do this without a troubled production and a whole bunch of interference.
And that's where I think his later films get so interesting, because something we talk about a lot regarding Fincher is how meticulous he is with crafting the perfect shot, right? And I was trying to think, like, what's the perfect word to describe Fincher as a filmmaker? And I looked at my own screen while we're recording this on StreamYard, and I look behind me. I've got this bass guitar here. This is called a precision bass. That's the name of this bass. And I think precision is the perfect name or perfect word to describe his filmmaking style, because that's what he's so precise. And I feel like he would of refined that precision a little bit more as he went along. But as far as just achieving that thrill and really hitting you with what he's capable of, I do think Seven is one of his best films in that regard.
I agree, because the effect he really wants to convey there is how disturbing and dark it is. You mentioned that it's in broad daylight. And there's, of course, the irony that his meltdown there is exactly what John Doe is wanting out of the game. And that's the only reaction he can give, because to react any differently would be inhuman. But that's where that film, I think, is just, from a psychological terror perspective, it's impeccable. And a lot of that is the writing, for sure. But I think the performances elevate that in some really fantastic ways. Perhaps some of it is framing and the score, as you're talking about, and maybe that's a little inconsistent. I don't know if I share that, but I could see that.
Well, yeah. I will say one thing that makes the ending sting as much as it does is the fact that after all of this happens, it just ends.
It just ends.
Nothing else after that. Apparently, there was a deleted scene or some type of deleted ending that was shot between these two characters in like an interrogation room. Thank God that was not included.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't think we need that. And I kind of wonder, I don't know if this is true, but do you think some of that is born out of watching Brad Pitt's performance and how flailing he is there, how human and devastating it is, and in the editing room thinking, I don't need anything else. This is it. This is my ending.
I think it's more so Morgan Freeman as to why.
And Freeman, both of them. Yeah. Honestly, how both of them react there.
It's really that final exchange that Morgan Freeman has with Arlie Ermey, where he just says simply, "I'll be around. I'll be around." That moment there, and then that last line, which is a little bit obvious, that voiceover where he says how this world is worth fighting for, and that it's a great world, but he only agrees with that one part, that it's a terrible world or something, or that it's a world worth fighting for. A little obvious, but it just the fact that the movie just ends just kind of maintains that poisonous sting that this movie is going for, which is what I really like about it.
Yeah. All right. All of that said, 7 is our new number 1.
And it's going to stay number 1 even with this next film we're going to talk about.
Let's talk about 1997's The Game. This is going to be interesting. I'm so fascinated to see where this goes. What do you think about The Game?
I think this movie's kind of fun. I think it's a fun movie. I don't think it's one of Fincher's best movies, though. And I think this is where watching any director's films in order of release can sometimes be both a great thing, but also kind of an annoying thing, because following 7 with The Game, it almost feels like backpedaling, because it is such a more minimalistic feeling film when compared to 7, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think what makes The Game so fascinating is kind of the game-like trickery of its narrative. I think it is a very fun movie, primarily because Michael Douglas has a lot of fun with it. I tend to see The Game more as like this comedic thriller, all things. And when I look at it in that light, I have a lot more fun with it, which is my way of saying, of the 3 films we're talking about, it's clearly my number 2 between 7, Alien 3, and this one. Like, this is my number 2 of the 3 we're going to be talking about thus far right now. But I do think it's a very fun film. It's just not one of his best, if you ask me.
Okay, so I am going to champion this a little bit. I really like this film a lot.
Okay.
It's not top tier Fincher. I do agree there. But I do find it to be one of his most thematically provocative, or at least interesting to me. And I feel like it isn't talked about enough. People will talk about its rules, the game itself, how hokey it might be. And there's certainly a lot of fun to be had, even if it gets a little weird at times. But what I find so compelling and poignant about the film is that in order for Nicholas to get closure from the trauma that has experienced as it relates to his father, he had to end up exactly like him, had to end up exactly like his father.
Sure.
And again, some people might find that a little bit hokey, but the truth is, once Nicholas decided to become like his father, he was transformed. If you had the opportunity to engage in therapy and jump off a roof, but you knew you would survive, that would not change you. It wouldn't, because you knew what was going to happen.
It's the action of knowing you won't survive. That's
exactly
the knowledge of that is what changes you.
Exactly. There would be no real lasting impact if it was nothing more than an amusement park ride. Nicholas jumped off that roof thinking he was going to die, knowing he was going to die. And that's the difference. That's where he got to be reborn, so to speak. And that type of transformation, I do think, is provocative. So say what you will about the plotting of the film and the contrived turns it may take you narratively, but I do think that in terms of what it all means in the end, emotionally, thematically, the arc of Nicholas, what he becomes, I do think that is actually very moving and thought-provoking. And I think the film has a lot to offer in that regard that just isn't talked about enough. And I think that's handled with sharp diligence and Fincher's storytelling and in the performance at the core of this film by Michael Douglas, who is so good here.
Yeah.
And that, to me, puts this in the middle of the pack for Fincher, for me.
And it sounds like we're not too far off on this movie. We maybe just latch on to different things as to why we both really like it, because the thing I love the most about the film is its sense of humor. I really do think this is a very funny movie. There's a line in this movie where someone says to Michael Douglas's character that you're a brain fetishist. Like it's like lines like that. It's a very funny movie, which is why I'm actually able to get on board with many contrivances and its plot conveniences, because it almost feels like they're in on the joke in some ways.
Yeah.
So I think it's also appropriate that the film literally ends with a joke on a t-shirt. As if to suggest that the film was kind of a joke in some ways, but it doesn't take away from the fact that there is still thematic that is there that you're latching on to. I just find the film so entertaining. I really do. I think it's a very fun movie.
So at this point, we have it at number 2.
So between the 3 films, 7, The Game, Alien 3.
Okay. I think we can agree there as we move on to 1999's Fight Club. All right, where do you have Fight Club?
Probably the most dangerous film you can ever talk about.
Yeah.
I like this movie a lot. I really do. It's not for Fincher for me, though.
Oh boy, here we go.
Well, I think for the most part, for most of its runtime, it is. I think what's really interesting about the film is maybe not so much on the film itself. It's the fact that it's been kind of misinterpreted over the years. It kind of fits into the same category of something like Scarface, right?
Sure.
Which has been appreciated and interpreted for perhaps the wrong reasons. The thing is, I think the movie is aware of that, which is what I think is so fascinating and predictive about the movie, is the way it plays into that machismo as kind of a problem, and it became kind of a byproduct of that. Like that's such an interesting irony with the movie that I just cannot help but appreciate. It's a movie that tries to have it both ways, and as this critique and celebration of anarchy and machismo and e-commerce, predating the whole Amazon craze, right?
Yeah, sure.
And I think by trying to have it both ways, it most succeeds at that, which I think is really fascinating. If anything, I think the final 20 minutes are just kind of sloppy. That's really the only problem with it. And I don't have a problem with the reveal. I don't have a problem with what it's suggesting thematically or what it's going about saying, but I think it's one of those cases where a big reveal happens and things just try to rush along to get to the ending. and I think the pacing just completely in a way that I think kind of detrimental to the movie. So that's really my only issue with it, which is why it's of the movies we've talked about so far, I definitely prefer Seven over Fight Club. But I think I'll still put it over The Game because what it is doing, I find a little bit more fascinating. So it is a very good film, but I wouldn't go as far as to say it's like one of my favorites of the 1990s, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Do you think that we would get canceled if I put The Game above this?
I mean, you would get canceled.
Okay.
I'm not putting it above The Game. I mean, I do like it more than The Game. I think it is. I think those first two acts, especially of Fight Club, are too good that I would have to put it above The Game. Even though I think The Game weirdly sticks the landing a little bit more interestingly.
Literally.
Yeah, literally. Okay, literally as well. So yeah, the majority of Fight Club works more for me, which is why I put it above The Game.
Okay,
But I'm not gonna push back too much on you because in totality, The Game has a lot of interest on its mind.
Look, I think you can make an argument that Fight Club, it is a more seamless experience in terms of it having less contrivances narratively. Although I don't know if it has as many rules. There's only one rule here. Obviously, we all know that.
Yeah, we're not going to say it.
The Game has more rules that maybe it sticks to
are
at
meant
times,
to be
maybe it
broken.
doesn't. Yeah, exactly. That are meant to be broken. And I think The Game, and I do mean this genuinely, I think The Game is a more fascinating film thematically. I do. I really do believe that.
Okay,
And
interesting.
part of that comes down to what you're talking about in terms of the film being misinterpreted over the years. Its messages on consumerism and masculinity are a bit obvious. I don't know if they're all that interesting. Its ideas on self-destruction are more interesting. And I do want to give Ryan and Jay some credit because when they talked about this on that extra film series they did, was that last year? Whenever they did that series, they did talk about that.
Maybe 2 years ago, actually.
2 years ago? Yeah, I guess it was quite a while ago.
Yeah.
But they did talk about that pretty thoroughly as far as its ideas on self-destruction being a lot more compelling than the consumerism stuff. That, maybe it was a little bit ahead of its time, but I think it's a little hollow and superficial. I do love that Fincher is aware that he's giving people what they want in terms of the drama and the tension here, the Fight Club of it all, only to pull the rug out from under them. That I do really like. And again, I think there's a seamlessness to that. There's still an artfulness to it all and how he crafts the film, how he structures the film, the timing of when he pulls that rug. All of that is handled with great diligence. And so I think you can make the argument that, yeah, it's a better crafted movie than The Game. And it's more sharp in its direction. Maybe the performances are certainly a little bit more loud and bombastic, and maybe they're a little bit more nuanced, although I don't know if I agree with that. But I could understand the argument. But I truly think Michael Douglas of the two films, if we're just comparing the two, I think gives the best singular performance out of the two. And I think the thematic ideas of The Game are also more provocative and nuanced if we're just talking about those two films. What this comes down to is the prominence of Fight Club. Do I want to get canceled? And is Fight Club as dense and as nuanced as maybe some people claim it to be? I don't know. Yes and no, I would say.
That I think that's what's fascinating about Fight Club is that it is yes and no to that question, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that yes and no can swap where those answers are, right? Like it's like sometimes I might watch the movie and think, oh, these ideas on consumerism are so old hat, like they're not offering anything. And then I watch it again and think, but for 1999, they were kind of predictive. So it's like it's
Yeah.
kind of like it's kind of a
little bit
double-edged sword.
both. To be
Yeah.
fair, yes. I don't want to just talk about it in hindsight in the perspective of 2020 or 2023 now, but
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah.
It was a little predictive, and I do like the sleight of hand.
Yeah.
As far as the last 20 minutes go, I'll be honest, I haven't seen this film in quite a while. I'd have to give it a watch to speak to that specifically. I don't have those memories, but
Well,
maybe on a rewatch through the eyes of 2023 and who I am now, maybe I would agree with you. I
as
don't know.
talk about it, you know what I think it is? I think it's one of those movies that it doesn't succeed in the way that, let's say, something like M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense does, where
Sure.
that reveal, the more you watch the film, you could still find something profound and moving and tricky about that reveal at the end, right?
Yes.
Whereas with Fight Club, for me, I think the film mostly works if you don't know that twist is coming. And when you know it and you rewatch it, for me, it's also kind of like The Usual Suspects, right? There's something kind of deflating when I go back and watch that film knowing how it's going to end. I don't know if the film properly builds its proper narrative around that reveal as much as I think it could. Which is, I think, a little bit unfortunate, because I think what comes before it is very fascinating. Now, I will say, with the 4 films we've talked about in this collective ranking thus far, in a weird way, I'm kind of tempted to put it below The Game just to see what the hell happens.
I mean, look, I
do like it more than The Game. I will say that, but I mean, the whole point of the movie is to try and challenge the norm, to try and challenge conformity. So maybe I'm doing the film a service by placing it somewhere where it doesn't belong.
But how much meaning is behind that, which is where it gets interesting, because I don't know if that ethos is as strong as people claim it to be. Maybe it is. I don't know. I'd have to rewatch the film, but like, I kind of go back and forth on it, because
I did. Yeah, the last time I did watch it was a few years ago, and it was one of those films where, because we talk about films aging gracefully or aging poorly, and Fight Club does both. Sometimes in the same scene, like that's, and I just find that fascinating. It's like a time capsule movie that is both predictive and behind the times. It's a weird thing. It's a weird movie.
Yeah, that is strange. I guess I just need to give that one a go. It's been so long, and I'd be curious to see where I lean on it, because upon a rewatch, maybe I would disagree with myself. Maybe there is more thematic substance there than I'm giving it credit for right now. I know that the film is pretending to have substance, intentionally or otherwise, but
which is kind of part of the fun.
Which is part of the fun. Yeah, I do think that Fincher is absolutely doing that intentionally. I don't know. I find The Game more provocative. I do.
So,
and Michael Douglas, I think, gives the best performance if we're just talking about these two.
So I guess for the sake of this specific exercise, do we want to go ahead and put Fight Club below The Game, just to see what our listeners do to us?
I don't know if I want that heat. Honestly,
like I said, I'm not opposed to it. I'm going to openly say, for those who actively listen to these shows, I do like Fight Club more than The Game, but in spirit of Fight Club itself, I kind of want to put it low on the list just to see what happens.
You know, I do too, but I'm also a little nervous to do that, if I'm being honest.
You're more skeptical than I am.
We'll have people coming after us and I don't know if I have the energy to combat them. And I'll just say this: the game, I subjectively prefer the game. I don't know if that
Right.
will change even on a rewatch. Even
Sure.
if I come around and think Fight Club, is actually one of Fincher's best movies, if we're just looking at it more objectively. That could be the case. I don't know. I still think that I'll prefer the game subjectively.
Mhm.
However, I'm willing to admit it is a more seamless experience. And the performances are still good. I think Fincher does have a command over that dichotomy we've been debating here. I think it really just comes down to, while in command, is it effective? Is it
Yeah.
still a little hollow? And I think the answer is kind of yes, but that's what makes it interesting.
Yeah.
So we can put
Which means there's
we can
nothing.
put it
There's
at-
nothing else like it.
No, I agree. So on those merits, we can put it at 2. But I'll
Okay.
just put it out there for the record. Subjectively, I still probably prefer the game. Just my
Okay.
subjective take on it.
All right. Well, at this point, we've got 7, Fight Club, The Game, and Alien 3. That order
Okay.
of the 4 stuff.
There you go. All right. Shall we move on? Let's move
yes,
on
what's
to
next?
Panic Room in 2002, which, we just did a retrospective last year on 2002. I do not believe that made either of our top 20s, or it might have been on your 20. I can't
It
remember.
was not anywhere near my
Okay.
top 20.
I couldn't remember because I was like, I don't think we talked about it on that retrospective, but I couldn't quite remember.
For a very specific reason. I do not like this movie.
Okay, here we go.
This is far and away my least favorite Fincher film. It's
Far
interesting.
away. Okay.
Like, it's not even close. This is the only one of his films I don't care for. And that includes Alien 3. And it's interesting. I looked at my Letterboxd review of this, which I logged back in like 2020, maybe even 2021, and I gave it a 3 out of 5, which I think I'm still being kind of generous. This is let me say what I appreciate about this film.
Okay.
It's very tight and efficient. It gets right out of the way. Like whatever setup it has to do, it just gets right to it. There's no time to spend time with characters and who is who and what they represent. It cuts out all of the fat, which I really do appreciate. It doesn't really relish that much in melodrama, which I also appreciate too. The problem I have with this movie, it is David Fincher's direction. He over directs this movie that it just does not work for me. The overuse of the CGI house and the way that it veers between different things, it does it so often that I think this film veers so close to self-parody. And that's how I feel throughout most of it. And then there's Jared Leto's performance, which I think only elevates those problems I have even further. It's the one time that I like Fincher and his wonderful command at tone management completely got away from him, or at least he kind of like ate his own soup and just went with it too much. Like he thought it tasted better than it actually did. So this one doesn't work for me. It really doesn't. So I know I'm playing my cards a little early. I don't know if you agree with me on this or not, but this is, of the 5 films we're talking about now, this is easily my 5 that we've talked about.
Okay, so like Fight Club, this is a movie that I haven't seen in a while. So it's hard to say if I was to watch this film immediately after this recording, if my thoughts would be the same. Who knows? But as it stands, my memory of it, I'm more with you than I'm against you. I don't know if I'm as extreme in my dislike as it sounds like you are. I will say, though, this is last on my list. I don't know if I can go as far as to say that it's far and away, but it is certainly last on my list. And I think a lot of it comes down to his direction, the goofy CGI that just does not work here.
No,
I don't think the craft is as sharp as we've seen with him previously. And I do think as a thriller, it is effective. And I really like the
At times,
performances here, at least the central performances here.
I will say I do like Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart here.
Yes. Yeah, I think they're both great, and they have a wonderful chemistry that is effective. So I still think there's plenty to like. If I was to log this on Letterboxd, as it stands, I'm in that 3, maybe 3.5 if I'm being generous.
Okay.
That's where I'm at right now. But I'd have to revisit the film and see if I swing one way or the other. But yeah, I like it enough because of the performances and how it acts as, a gregarious thriller, I guess.
Well,
But
yeah, and this is hoping for, and I hate to give myself expectation, but this is what I'm hoping for with Fincher's new film, The Killer, is kind of being like this successful pulpy exercise in style, right?
Yeah,
Which I feel
yeah.
like, and Fincher's the kind of filmmaker that can certainly succeed in doing that. And not all of his films have to have some type of like trashy substance to them.
Yeah.
They could just be exercises in thrilling style. That's more or less what this film I feel like is good for. I just feel like his direction really gets in the way of that because there are great performances here, not just from Kristen Stewart and Jodie Foster, but even Forrest Whitaker, I think, is very good here.
Yeah.
I think the three of them, as the core of this movie, there is potentially something great here. And I think what the film needed was maybe a little bit more containment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that. Yeah, I'm with you. Forrest Whitaker is very good. Jared Leto is the only one that is, we'll say, miscast. To be
Well,
nice.
I felt the same way about Dwight Yoakam as well in this.
Okay.
Yeah, I felt like Jared Leto and Dwight Yoakam felt like they came out of a different movie for me.
I can definitely
This
agree
was a
about
few years
Leto,
ago.
but-
Yeah, this is a few years ago when I last saw the film, so maybe I'll be in a better headspace when I watch it again. But as it stands now, it's the one Fincher film I'm at the very best mixed on.
Okay. Well, I noted that I'm going to have some extra, well, I don't know if I'll have extra time, but I won't be able to get to a theater over the course of the next few days when I'm in Orlando. But I'll have some time in the evenings before we go to bed. Maybe in anticipation for The Killer, I'm just going to catch up on Panic Room.
There you
revisit
go, and
Fight
see
Club,
see,
and
see what changes.
See what changes.
Yeah.
So it might be interesting to revisit this exercise in another week or after we get to that film, and see if any of this shifts at all. But as it stands, I'm with you. I mostly like the performances. I like it as a thriller. I think there's some fun to be had. The direction is a little overcooked and the CGI is way too goofy. Do not like it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Okay, let's move on to everyone's favorite film from 2007, and that is Zodiac. Or maybe I'm just speaking for me. Who knows? But what do you think about Zodiac?
2007, dude. You're talking about one of the greatest years of all time as far as film is concerned. There are a lot of favorites you can have there, but if someone were to say Zodiac was the best film of that year, I don't know if I would push back too much on that.
Well, because look, when we did that retrospective, I will remove Once from the conversation because I love Once so much, and there's so much subjective power that film has over me. I will say though, I will not deny that the three-headed monster of that year is There Will Be Blood, No Country for Old Men, and I will absolutely add Zodiac to the list. And I don't know if it's always been there in terms of the discourse, because it's, especially probably in the first 10 years after that year, it was always the debate of No Country or There Will Be Blood. I think Zodiac is just as good as those two movies. So you can have a three-headed coin as far as I'm concerned and flip that all day long.
I mean, that whole year was like a seven-headed coin. It was that good of a year.
There's
I would
certainly
also
many more to consider for sure. But
I would throw Ratatouille in there, The Assassination of Jesse James,
Atonement, I love
Atonement. But I mean, Zodiac's in any other year, Zodiac could be number one.
It would be my number one in most other years, especially when I go through that decade. I don't know if there's another year aside from ironically 2010 when we get to The Social Network. But any other year, maybe 2006, maybe 2004. There are a few that it would certainly fight, but most of the years, even in the 2010s, there are definitely some years I would have Zodiac at number one for sure.
Speaking of number one, this is my favorite Fincher film. I'm just gonna throw it out there. Yeah, this is my number one, and it's gonna stay my number one for the rest of this whole episode. I'm just throwing it out there. I don't really care about surprises at this point. It's kind of an interesting transition point for him, right? We talk about filmmakers and the journey they go through. Sometimes there's that one film where you notice things are changing for them, right? Like, let's say with regard to Wes Anderson, right? We sometimes talk about that with the Royal Tenenbaums, or let's say with something like the Grand Budapest Hotel, where there are certain like inflection points in their filmographies where you start to notice, okay, the trend and the tone and the mood and the themes and the sophistication and maturity is changing in a different way. Zodiac is that film for Fincher, because from here, his career kind of shifted a little bit. And I think in many ways, it's kind of the greatest like David Fincher buffet rolled into one film. It still has some of the pulpiness of Seven, for instance, but it's the perfect merriment with some of his more sophisticated qualities we would see in Benjamin Button, The Social Network, Gone Girl, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So it doesn't feel like a trial run. Like, it feels like the perfect summation of everything he is capable of doing. And on top of that, I'll ask a question here, and this question is, it's very rhetorical, by the way. Does this movie have the greatest art direction of all time?
Yeah. It's
well made.
Very
this
much
movie
in
is
the conversation.
Perfection, man.
And like I'm with you. I think this is David Fincher's masterpiece. Although you can certainly argue there's another one on the list.
Yeah.
But this for me is his best film. And I'm with you. It's a masterwork of meticulous research, precision detailing. It puts most police procedurals to shame. The craftsmanship, as you're talking about, the painstaking level of authenticity is blistering. The production design, the 70s aesthetics, the cinematography, Jake Gyllenhaal's terrific performance. In terms of craft, it's absolutely Fincher's best as far as I'm concerned all around. However, I think what elevates this for me, and this circles back to a little bit of what you were talking about with Fight Club in terms of how predictive that film is. I think this film makes a stellar argument as to why our culture is so devoted to unsolved mysteries and how easy it is to get wrapped up in wanting answers. And the fact that Fincher avoids settling for answers is what makes this so profound.
Oh yeah, this is totally the precursor to a podcast like Crime Junkie.
Well,
right?
And that's what I wanted to get. And what's interesting about the podcast craze, or even if you want to consider Netflix and the kind of documentaries or TV series that are devoted to this because of the same idea, though, that people crave this. And it's interesting because it also comes down to who is the investigator in that film. It's not a police officer. It's not someone that has any authority whatsoever. He is us. He's an everyday person that is obsessed with this unsolved mystery. He's the one that is trying to find the answers. And that is the world we live in. That's podcasting. It's not police officers that are doing the podcast. It's everyday people. It's everyday people that crave these things all the time.
And he worked
predictive.
And he worked for the San Francisco Chronicle, but he wasn't a journalist.
He wasn't a journalist.
He was a cartoonist.
He made cartoons for a living.
Yeah.
So like he's no different than you or I that is obsessed with this unsolved mystery. the only thing that separates him from you and I is that we just listen to podcasts. We listen or we watch a documentary about it. We're still as obsessed with it. We want to know who the Zodiac killer is. You make a documentary about it, millions of people will watch. You make a podcast about it, millions of people will listen. We're just as obsessed. The only difference is Gyllenhaal is willing to put himself out there. He's willing to do the investigating. So, but symbolically, you need a representative, and that's what makes this film incredible. Like, it stands the test of time in that regard.
And just as a movie about obsession, I think it joins the ranks of movies like Hitchcock's Vertigo as some of the best versions of that thematic idea.
I agree.
So we don't have anything to disagree on here.
Yeah.
We really don't. This is my favorite Fincher film, as I said, and I think it's. I mean, given the conversation we're about to have, I don't know if it'll change, but this will remain my number one, probably for the rest of his filmography. I don't think he'll ever make a film this good, and I hate to say that because I'm sure he's capable of doing something this good again. But I think this will always be my favorite, just given when it came out in my personal upbringing as a film lover. It was kind of a formative film for me as far as this type of movie is concerned. So I think I'm always going to hold it in this high regard, regardless of what he comes out with next. So I think it's a perfect movie of its kind. I really do.
I agree. I still think he's got this in him. And
I do too.
Open to it.
I do too. I think he does have this in him again, and that's not what I'm suggesting. I just don't think I'll be able to like it more than Zodiac because of where this sits in my formative growth. It's a 110% subjective thing.
Okay, so then the very next year, he takes a wildly different turn to The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. All right. Yeah. Where are we putting this one?
All right. I'm almost tempted to figure this out by simply asking you, of the 7 films now, including Benjamin Button, where would you put this one?
Where would I put this one? Like on my list entirely?
On your list. Let's say let's say of the 7 we're talking about here, just so for I guess a recap, we've got Zodiac, 7, Fight Club, The Game, Alien 3, and Panic Room. That's the order. If you had to be the one to place Benjamin Button within that order, where would you put it?
Just above Alien 3.
So number 5 then.
Yep.
I put it at number 3. So this might be our first disparity. I think I kind of love this movie. I really do. I don't know. You don't dislike this movie though, right? From what I understand,
I think it's pretty slight. I think it's
okay. I think it's pretty powerful.
Overly sentimental. I don't love these performances as much as I do others in his filmography. They're fine. Look, everything about this film, I think is fine. I don't have anything negative. I'm not going to come across as being antagonistic toward Benjamin Button. And I know this film has its fervent defenders. I know a lot of people think this film is overlooked and that it's quite good. It sounds like you're certainly one of them.
I do think it's quite good. I don't know if I would say it's like a hidden masterpiece or anything like that. The film is not perfect. If there is any issue, it is the length. But one of the things I love about the film, and maybe in a weird way, it's also a praise to the film's length. It's a film where very little even happens. And one of the things I love about it, I used to go back to this film and have issues with the fact that if you took away the backwards aging gimmick, it doesn't really change Benjamin Button's life. And for a while, I found myself defending that. But then the more I think about the movie, you take that away, his life does completely change. He lived a very ordinary life simply because his condition didn't allow him to do anything of meaning. And that's what I found so powerful thinking about the movie as I've gotten older. It's a movie that has stayed with me as I've gotten older because of the weird like meaninglessness of it all. And it's a weird way to defend a movie because of how extravagant it looks, how epic it feels, and how lush the cinematography and music is. Alexandre Desplat's score is very romantic and very fantastical. but in a weird way, it almost creates like this irony, like it's all part of the point. Like like this life can have the perception of such lushness and such beauty when very little of meaning even happened, and that was sort of prevented for him. So it's a weird reaction I've had to the movie as I've gotten older that is just elevated for me. So that's why I respond to it, even though I do recognize, as a as a full piece in totality, it can trim some fat a little bit. And there is maybe a bit too much passivity at times with regard to the performances, but there are individual pockets that I do find very powerful when nothing literally happens. Like I find that kind of interesting about the film.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And I will say those thematic ideas I do find poignant. I just think it lacks weight in execution. I just don't find the film all that enthralling. I do like Fincher's digital experimentations that he's doing here. I just feel like it's better served for the lack of a better term, the trashy narratives that he chooses later on. Like when we get to Gone Girl, because I think there's a lot stylistically that are the same, but I think in terms of amplifying trash, I think Fincher's style works so much better in that regard than what he's doing here for Prestige. And I just find the execution here too sentimental and schmaltzy. And I just don't love these performances. As much as, we talked about Brad Pitt earlier, this is not one of my favorites. I love him I
like him in this. It sounds like I'm higher on.
And again, I'm not saying he's bad, but comparatively to his great performances, this is very mundane. Like it's serviceable. It works. I don't think it's bad. I just find it very middling.
Well, yeah, which is a weird way of kind of defending the performance for me. Seriously, like the middling quality of his performance, the fact that he's kind of expressionless, kind of shows like how his condition and how it prevented him from having a life of meaning, kind of robbed him of any emotional meaning then. And weirdly, like the overall concept of the movie, I think sort of saves it for even though there is this lingering passivity that I know is not going to work for a lot of people. And admittedly, it did not work for me for the longest time. When I first saw this movie, I thought, oh, this is just Eric Roth as a writer ripping off Forrest Gump, his own I was kind of one of those people, but I think there's more on this film's mind that I've come to appreciate as I've gotten older. And at least from a performance piece, Taraji P. Henson's at least greater. I love watching her. So there are at least some 10 moments from a supporting character standpoint that kind of help balance out some of that blankness that Benjamin Button has that I found very interesting.
Yeah, no, again, you make a great point. I'm not arguing the intent. It's the execution.
And that's the thing. But see, like the intent and the execution are kind of there for me. It sounds like the overall concept and the idea is fusing with the execution for me more so than it is for you, which is perfectly fair. And that's perfectly fine. I'm just, for some reason, I'm able to sense those things. Or at least, I at least think the film is going for that.
Yeah, I wish that I could buy into that, and because that's fascinating. I don't know if that was purposeful or not on Pitt's on Pitt's performance for him to try to be as, I don't even want to say stoic, but just as mundane as possible because it fits the life thematically on the page. I don't know if that was an intentional choice or not.
It's like, here's an example, for instance, and again, I don't know if this is the film's intent. I don't know if this was Fincher's intent, but one of the key emotional scenes of the movie is when Taraji P. Henson's character of Queenie, when she passes away. And the funeral scene, you notice Benjamin Button himself, for how much he loved his mother, his unofficial mother, his adopted mother, He doesn't really express any emotion in that scene. And when I was young, I found myself thinking, why isn't he crying? This is a wasted opportunity. And as I've gotten older, I realize he's not crying. Does he even know how to process that kind of emotion? That is devastating. And that's where I found something weird about this movie that only kind of gracefully aged for me. And again, I don't know if that was the intent. I could be just projecting my own wishes in this movie and finding something great out of it. I don't know, but it has aged for me in the upper echelon.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I just wish that I could be engaged with the performance in that way, dramatically or emotionally. And I just find myself bored to tears, for the lack of a better term. I know that's not eloquent, but
so unfortunate. I hear you. I get it.
I find it all extremely banal. And, you know, I will say my favorite thing about Benjamin Button, to, I guess, regurgitate what I said earlier, Fincher does not move away from this style. He does maintain it, but with better material. He forgoes the sentimental and the prestige for the airport novel, and I think it's extremely effective under that guise. But here, it just I don't have anything extreme to say about Benjamin Button. I feel like I'm being like overly negative in this because I'm so detached from it. I just find it mundane. That's it. That's really
I think that's
all
fair.
I can say about it.
I find it mundane as well, and I see that as a praise. I think that's kind
I
of
just see it as mundane.
That's so interesting. So now the hard part is this will not be a mundane conversation here. Where the hell do we rank this thing?
Well, and that's I don't see. This is interesting. This is where I may be going to. I think I hurt myself a little bit by, I guess, succumbing to the whole Fight Club, the game debate we had earlier, because I think the game is significantly better, like not even close. So I don't know how to even respond as far as where to put this, because the two aren't even close as far as I'm concerned. But you have this at number 3, so like you have this above Fight Club even.
I have this above Fight Club. I
mean, that's
okay. You know, I
think the best thing to do here is just to put it below Fight Club. That makes the most sense mathematically.
Listeners and watchers, forgive me for a second. I'm going to try something here just to see. I sometimes like to get a sense of how I feel about rankings by actually typing them out and to see how it all looks and to kind of get the bigger picture all at once.
Yeah, that's what I've done here.
All right, I might have to make an executive decision here, JD.
Oh God.
I think we need to go back and swap the game and Fight Club.
Okay.
Not because I think they should, but I do genuinely want to put Benjamin Button above Fight Club. But weirdly, I'm okay putting it below the game. I can't explain it. I can't. I think your passion. No, seriously. I think your passion for the game is really elevating it on this list. I do.
Okay. All right.
And then
fine.
my passion for Benjamin Button, I think both of our respective passions for these two movies put it above Fight Club.
All right.
Because let's go back to our...
Fine. I can live with that, sure.
Let's go back to our conversation on Fight Club. It was kind of passive. We both acknowledged the flaws, but also the fascinations of that movie. But I'll be honest. Which Fincher films do I think about more? I think about Benjamin Button more than Fight Club.
I think about the game. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if you gave me the option to rewatch the game or Fight Club, I'm going to choose the game every time. Every time.
Yeah. I'm
I
It depends on my
made
mood, but I
that
might go back and
decision
forth.
because I didn't want people to come after me and hurt me.
Okay, okay.
But
At
yeah, that's
Brendan
how I feel.
J. Cassidy, I'll make the executive decision. If you have a problem with that, you can come to me. I'll
Okay, there you go.
take the heat for it. I will.
Okay.
So how does that sound? How does that
That
with these
works for
7
me.
films?
Sure, let's do
So
it.
okay, so Zodiac, 7, The Game, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Fight Club, Alien 3, and then Panic Room.
Okay, that works.
I
Okay.
don't know how I came up with that rationale, but it weirdly made me feel good. I don't know.
I like it.
I'm passionate about Benjamin Button the way you are passionate about The Game. So I feel like we
Okay.
have to
That's fine.
fuse some
works.
personality into this.
No, it makes sense. Okay, well, let's move on to 2010, where we get The Social Network. Where are we putting this one?
All right, we're not going to disagree on this one, are we?
I certainly hope not.
This is his worst film.
Even though earlier, like Panic Room is by far his by far my least favorite.
No, I'm not really good at playing those tricky jokes, am I? I mean, we already said that we do think Zodiac is his best, right? So why don't we just go ahead and say this is our number 2?
Yeah. Did you have this? Remind me. I might even have to look up mine. I don't even know. Did you have this in listed on your list for best of the decade?
Yes, it was in my top 10.
In your top 10. Okay, yeah.
It was somewhere in my 6 through 10. I think I may have had it at number 7 when we did that list. I don't remember offhand.
Yeah.
And
I'd
I don't
have to
know
look
if
it
it
up.
would I don't know if it would still be in that range, but
Yeah, I was just curious. Yeah,
yeah.
because obviously we're both pretty high on it. So.
oh yeah, the short of it is it's one of the best of the 2010s. That's how I feel like we both feel about this film. I feel like it was a cultural and defining film of what it meant for entrepreneurship, especially in the digital age. I think it definitely represented both the innovations and the treachery of all of it too. It gets so much right. In many ways, I think this was perhaps Fincher's most predictive film, especially given the world of entrepreneurship nowadays. But I don't know. Zodiac was a very predictive film as well. It's hard to say. Weirdly, I think his 2 best films were his most predictive from a genre pushing and obsessive fascination standpoint. The way it reflected us as people. I think these are his 2 most predictive movies, and I do think they're his 2 best.
Yeah, I am with you on that. So sorry, I'm trying to look up our list for best of the decade.
Yeah, I could have sworn I had this at number 7.
I have it pulled up. So you have this at number 9 on that list.
Oh, number 9. Okay.
Okay. Some really great films in front of it, though. Although looking at your list is hilarious to me because there's at least one film on here, maybe 2, that is just so quintessentially Brendan.
Oh, I know one of them. You're looking at Everybody Wants Some. For one of them, right?
Just can't help but laugh at that. That's incredible.
Is the other? The other one, of course, is The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, right?
Yeah, you have that at number 3.
Yeah, which
great,
honestly,
that's a great movie, though. I love.
yeah, I'd probably put that at number 1.
Fair enough. So I have The Social Network at number 4 on my list for best of the decade.
So
that's
good
how much
movie,
I love it.
right?
Yeah, I will say, looking at this list, I would bump that up or bump it down 1 to 5 because like when we did that list, I put Her at number 5. Those are a little interchangeable. I can sleep at night though with The Social Network being at number 4 on that list, but yeah, that is to say, one of the best films of not just 2010, but of the decade. Certainly represents this generation extremely well. The performances, earlier you mentioned something about precision. The precision of this film is astounding. And that comes through in the simple fact that the opening scene, they shot like 483 times. And
amazing.
While I'm being facetious, it was a lot. And and it's incredible because the dialogue there is incredibly snappy. They go through a lot of dialogue, but it really is fascinating. And what Aaron Sorkin does, it truly is phenomenal. That opening scene is important. I understand why they wanted to get that right, not just because there's a lot of dialogue, but it sets the tone impeccably for where that film was going to go. I think
Yeah.
that opening scene as it is important because of that. I think the script and how Fincher embodies it in his filmmaking, what's really incredible, and we've talked about this with a couple of other films. It's fascinating because so much of the dialogue is about computer programming
Yeah.
and being in that world. You know, they're talking in a language in lingo that not many of us know, yet we can't help but be hypnotized by what's happening on screen in that film. You understand it. We know where the characters stand, and it's incredible. And of course, it goes on to be the story about ambition and desire for greatness and social media and everything that many of us can certainly relate with. But yeah, Social Network is great. I mean, I called Zodiac Fincher's masterpiece, but this might be another one.
I mean, he's got a few of them, right? But of the ones we've talked about, in fact, really of his whole career, I might just say this: I think The Social Network is his most rewatchable.
Oh my gosh.
This is the one I could easily go back to and have a great time every time.
No, I mean, absolutely. Because Zodiac, for all of its greatness, is extremely methodical, certainly unsettling at times, you know, especially given the murder and rape scenes in that film. And even just kind of the symbolic imagery that you see at times. And obviously the material is just dark and harrowing. Social Network certainly has the underbellies of something that is unsettling, given what Facebook has become in our country, for sure, or in our society, in the world even. But yeah, on its face, the pacing of the film is incredible. The performances are great. Everything about it is so engaging, so energetic and fun. Yeah, I mean, you can put that on anytime and have a wonderful time with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so Social Network, number 2.
Number 2.
Back to something that more dark and unsettling. As we move on to
Just a little bit.
2011, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Where are we at with this one?
You know, if you asked me what I thought about this movie like 5 years ago, I would have said, oh, it's Fincher's worst movie.
Fincher's
worst movie.
worst. Wow.
5 years ago, I would have said that. You ask that now, I would say, I actually think it's one of his better movies. So I have this one pretty high. I came around on this one. I think part of the reason why I was so down on this movie when I first saw it was I had already seen the Swedish film, and I loved it so much that I was kind of cynical towards any
you were in your
reinterpretation.
pretentious phase. Yeah,
I was
see.
in my bad Brendan phase. I'll simply call it that. And I think just my love of that Swedish film was clouding my judgment. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not even sure if I still prefer that version or not. I have to go back and rewatch it. But Fincher's take on this story has grown on me immensely. I think the first half is so attentive to its procedural plotting. At times, it might suffocate the drama a little bit, but I just love how procedural that it is. It's all about the process, and I love that consistency there. The back half, though, when Mikhail and Lisbeth finally team up, boy, does this thing cook. It just cooks. And I don't know if I would call it one of Fincher's most thematically interesting or even dense movies, but I think it's one of his saddest movies, at least given where it ends up.
Quality, for sure.
Yeah, that final scene in particular, I think, might be the most melancholic moment of any Fincher film. So I love, and I think the other thing too is, you know, like, remember how crazy the opening credits for this movie were? Like the utilization of this remix of Immigrant Song with
Yeah.
almost what feels like a James Bond opening, but it almost feels like a misdirect at times, right? To lead to a film that's way more methodical, only to then lead into something grosser and sadder by the end. It's almost like this is Fincher kind of playing with his own established ethos and kind of creating a sleight of hand a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And I think because of that, I've come to appreciate this film a lot more as time has gone on. This came out in 2011, and it's honestly one of the better films from that year now. At least it is for me. It's grown on me for me.
Yeah, I really like this as well. I know we're getting low on time, so I'll try to be brief here so we can move on. I know we have at least 2 more to get to.
Yeah.
I think this is meticulously crafted. It's unsettling. It's an incredible experiment in atmosphere for Fincher. I love how atmospheric it is. Gorgeously bleak cinematography. Love the score. Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara are great. I really like this as well. I probably, like, on this list, I'm not sure where you have it. I could put it maybe just below 7.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking number 4 on this list, just above The Game.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to 2014. Gone Girl. What do we think about Gone Girl?
Not the best film to revisit after you just got married.
Nope. You better be nice now.
I did revisit this some time ago. This was back when Maris and I were we may not have even been engaged at that point, but her and I watched it together. At that time it was available on Hulu, and she hated it. Like, it was too anxiety inducing for her.
Fair.
It really was. And I get it. And honestly, given the fact that our relationship with it's so great, it kind of made me like the film a little bit less, just given my loving headspace that I'm in right now. But at the same time,
it's cold. It's unrelenting. That's for
I
sure.
think that's that secretly it is what I appreciate about the film, right? Is that it is so cold, it is so unrelenting, and it is perhaps the Fincher film that is the most trashy while simultaneously having something on its mind, right?
Yes.
Like, in many ways, it's almost like a more extreme version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Like, it kind of takes the same trashy elements and even adds more nuance, more complications to it, which is a way of saying I think it might be a better and more important movie than The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I think I prefer Dragon Tattoo overall, just from what I prefer to rewatch. I think that's a film, Dragon Tattoo, that should have spearheaded a franchise. Like, I really wish it would have.
Yeah, A24 will get it next. Yeah.
Maybe they will, and I hope they bring back Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara.
Rooney Mara, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great. We don't get, the spider's web thing, whatever the heck that was called.
Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah, so I feel like this Gone Girl specifically would be ranked somewhere like in that 4 or 5 range for me on the list that we have right now. I do really like it quite a bit.
Okay, so I do like this better than Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Okay.
I think this is really great. I love how cold and unrelenting it is. I agree with you. I think it does have something on its mind as it relates to pride and resentment. It's done in this trashy way, but I love the style that Fincher employs here. It really is the Benjamin Button style, but trashier. That's the best way to articulate it. And I love that. The pacing is sharp, robust. These performances are great. Rosamund Pike should have won an Oscar. How she didn't even get nominated is just astonishing.
I thought she was nominated.
Was she?
I think she was.
I thought she got over.
I think that was the year Julianne Moore won for Still Alice.
She at least won. Oh, great. Now I got to look this up. Best
I'm looking it up
actress.
too. If you want to keep talking about how much you love this
Okay,
movie,
well,
I'll take a look at this.
At any rate, she should have won. She gave the best actress performance of that year.
She was nominated. She was nominated.
She was nominated. Okay, well, at least she was nominated. We missed out on the Jake Gyllenhaal Nightcrawler thing, but at least she was nominated. She should have won though. Ben Affleck, I really love. This is one of my favorite performances of his as well. The stark cinematography. I just love how darkly lit it is, the mood of it all. Yeah, I love this. This is really great. Easily number 4 on this list for me.
Yeah, I could put it at number 4 as well. Like I said, I do prefer The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but I think I just respond more to that film's sadness than I do this film's cynicism. But this is also a film that has a cynicism that I do really respect. It's also a very funny film, a very perverted
I love the
film.
tension. I love how it kind of, and Fincher does. We've talked about this a little bit even in this conversation, but he loves to just linger on a note, and like to end a film on a certain note. And Zodiac has that even a little bit as well. And Gone Girl, like he just leaves on this palpable note of tension that is unforgettable. It's just so good.
The only question I have about the film, and it's not really a criticism. I'm still wrestling with it. I'm still unsure about Neil Patrick Harris in the film. I'm not so sure about his performance.
I think he serves the role extremely well. It is a little grating, but I think it's meant to be.
Okay. I don't find it grating at all. I find it nothing. Like the way you describe Brad Pitt and his mundanity in Benjamin Button is the way I feel about Neil Patrick Harris in this movie. But the reason why I find it to be a question is because I don't know what it's meant to convey. And maybe it is meant to be kind of blank. And to further just kind of, I guess, prove the unrelenting evil of Rosamund Pike's character. I don't know.
Maybe I think he brings an energy to the film that is very vividly different than what we get with Pitt and Benjamin Button. I mean, I don't think it's anything nuanced. It's kind of one note, but he's serving a very specific purpose. Like the film is putting him on a hook. And I think he leans into that very well.
Maybe I need to watch it again without thinking about his role on How I Met Your Mother, which I kind of have that glued into my my subconscious, and it's hard to separate. So perhaps that's more me thing than anything else.
And that's the risk of casting, actors like that when they're so known for a specific role.
Especially when both characters, Collins, I think his name is here, and of course Barney from How I Met Your Mother. They're both. He's not really a womanizer in this movie, but he does kind of have a demanding quality in some ways to what he desires, sexually speaking.
Yeah.
So the fact that you can almost say that that they have similar motivations just with different presentations. Maybe that's why I keep thinking about Barney as opposed to Collins. I don't know.
I mean, and that's I do think if you separate the two, I think he conveys what he needs to for that character to work, especially when that reveal comes. And for us that didn't read the novel, and I'm certainly one of those, I did not see that coming. And holy Lord, what a moment that is. So I found it extremely effective. And certainly Rosamund Pike amplifies it with her performance, but yeah, I love it. I think it's very,
all right.
very good.
So yes, we have this. I'm okay with putting this at number 4. Like I said, I do prefer Dragon Tattoo, but Gone Girl does have a little bit more on its mind, so I'm able to give it a little bit more credit there.
All right, so then on to the last one before we get a chance to see The Killer, and that is Mank from 2020, a polarizing movie. Surprisingly, where do you sit on this?
It doesn't feel like a Fincher film. It really doesn't, and that's the thing I love the most about it is him trying to do something a little bit different, aesthetically, tonally. I do really like this film. Admittedly, I've only seen it the one time that it came out in 2020. I think it was. So I feel a little incomplete trying to rank this film as permanently as I would like. But right now, my heart is telling me that this would go somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
I kind of feel like, so we've got 10 films that we've talked about thus far, now 11, including Mank. I think I'd want to put this at number 6. That's kind of where, but I don't know. It's I say that, but I still prefer The Curious Case of Benjamin Button over this one. I don't know if I prefer The Game or Fight Club, but I think just given the context of how different that this is for David Fincher and what it means for movies about movies, and how it almost feels like his own response to his time making Alien 3, which I think is also very fascinating.
Yeah.
Even though the film is about Citizen Kane,
Mm-hmm.
I find that fascinating, which makes it kind of an interesting, I guess, detour in his filmography, one that he felt like he had to make, and definitely a passion project for him, given the fact that it was written by his late father. So I middle tier Fincher for me. I'll simply say that.
Okay, so I really love Mank. I think this is a movie, if you're blind to Citizen Kane, if you're apathetic to it, maybe you're probably prone to be disappointed with the film given its specificity, which is deliciously ironic because I think it's also Fincher's lightest and maybe his funniest film today. It's really
it is
funny.
definitely a comedy. It's a comedy.
There is a healthy dose of his patented cynicism, but more so it's chock full of levity and wit and charm. And I think it makes the film tonally his most accessible, while narratively and thematically being distinct and singular, as you noted in your thoughts as well. And I think the reverence that Fincher shows for Citizen Kane and for Mank himself is so palpable. And he very deliberately goes out of his way to demonstrate that adoration. And I'm Citizen Kane's biggest champion. So that, of course, very much works for me. So it's very different. You're right. I mean, you talk about Zodiac, Social Network, Seven, Gone Girl, Dragon. You go down the list. Aside from Benjamin Button, and maybe The Game. I mean, there's a lot of cynicism, a lot of darkness to his movies, and this is a film that is so not that at all.
It depicts a world of darkness, right?
Yeah, just
but
in
it
a very different way.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily portray it as darkness, which is what I think is so interesting.
Yeah,
like
very light,
like the
very
fact
funny.
that he's like cynically portraying the politics of the Hollywood elite, right? But does so in a very lighthearted way.
Yeah.
I find that to be an interesting approach, especially for someone like David Fincher. I think that's something we don't give him enough credit for, is that he's a really funny guy. He has a good sense of humor. And his films are usually pretty funny. Like Gone Girl I mentioned earlier, that's a very funny movie.
Hilarious.
Even though it's not really a comedy. There are
same
actually
thing with
moments.
Social Network. Social Network's not a comedy, but there's some biting lines.
Well, that movie's hilarious. Dragon Tattoo has some funny moments as well. And just Fincher, is he my favorite filmmaker of all time? No. But he is probably my favorite filmmaker to listen to directors' commentaries of.
Sure.
just given his sense of humor.
Yeah, I think Mank is a little overlooked, maybe because of the Citizen Kane of it all, and I know a lot of people are tired of that movie and it being so prominent in the film community. But
you guys just have to reference. You guys have to acknowledge it's a great movie. It's a great movie.
It's a great movie. And I think Mank is very good. I love how distinct and unique this is among Fincher's filmography. And I think on its own terms, it's very good. It's not his best, I agree, but I think it's pretty good. I have this firmly right behind Dragon on this list. Dragon Tattoo. That's where I would put it.
I can live with that. Oh man, Benjamin Button is so low for me on our list. I want to put that so much higher, but I get it. I can't help but think if my reaction to that movie is the movie or is it me projecting something into the movie that's not there? Like I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that on our list here, which I'll say right now, Zodiac #1, then The Social Network, Seven, Gone Girl, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Mank, The Game, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Fight Club, Alien 3, and then Panic Room.
Yep.
I want to put Benjamin Button up higher, but I understand why it probably shouldn't. And of course, Fight Club being as low as it is, we're probably going to start our own Fight Club here. We're going to start our own Fight Club here.
Oh,
I think his other films above it are more thoughtful. I really do. And I think I think the thoughtfulness of Fight Club nowadays are more by accident, which makes it fascinating. But I don't know if that's a praise to the movie or more of the times.
Yeah, it may be a little bit of both, but
yeah,
I agree. That's what makes the film interesting, for sure. It's
I'm glad it exists as it does. I'm so glad it exists as it is.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, I will consistently go back to Zodiac, The Social Network, and Seven. Like those are my top three, my personal top three, not just our collective top three. Those are my personal top three of the films he's made thus far, and it sounds like they are for you as well.
Yes, I would put Zodiac, Social Network, Seven, and then probably Gone Girl after that. Definitely Gone Girl after that.
Okay.
So that's kind of where I'd be.
But well, we have this top three.
Yeah. So very, very fun. I'd be curious to know what everyone else thinks. I know there's going to be people in the comments or coming at us on social media. This is not the conventional David Fincher list, but that's what makes this exercise fun. So,
it's what makes him a good filmmaker too.
Absolutely. All right. I know we're going pretty long here, so we'll go ahead and wind down the show.
Yeah.
Brendan, it's good to have you back, man. And I think you'll be here next week, and then you're off to your honeymoon.
Aruba, baby. Aruba.
Very
so I'll come back with a nice tan. Or a nice burn, actually. I hear people burn pretty quickly there.
I would believe it.
Yeah.
Okay, just before we get out of here, a couple of quick plugs. Our Wes Anderson Roald Dahl Shorts conversation review should be up, so go and check that out. We will have a review for The Killer coming soon once we're able to get our hands on it. Obviously, we'll have a review for Killers of the Flower Moon coming out very soon as well.
Absolutely.
And also be on the lookout for our latest Women in Session, which, because I'm going to Disney, I'm not exactly sure when the latest episode is going up. It might be up by the time this is live. I'm not entirely sure. But just be on the lookout for that. We'll have a new Women in Session coming out very soon as well. Be sure to follow us on social media. Hit us up, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Let us know, again, if you agree or disagree with our list here. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that fun jazz. Brendan, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I'm still dancing from the wedding, man.
Yeah, you should be. It's one of the best nights of your life.
I normally don't drink during these podcasts, but I had a couple drinks tonight. I'm just not. I'm not done.
Yeah, that's good.
I had to go back to work this week. I had to get to work this week too. Weird feeling.
I bet. I'm sure.
Taking some time off. Well, it's a weird feeling knowing that you're going back, and then after like a week, you're going on your honeymoon, so you're taking another week off anyway. So it's like this weird back and forth that I have to go through, these peaks and valleys. But
for sure,
slowly getting back to the world of normalcy. But it's really nice to feel like, or it's nice to be a married man. It really is.
Yeah.
I got to marry my best friend, and I'm so happy
it's great. Yeah, it was a great time. Congratulations once again.
Thank you very much.
It was really fun to see you.
And a huge thank you to Dave Giannini for not only filling in for me this past weekend, but at least one other time while I'll be gone in Aruba. I think the plan is to get him back a second time.
Yes.
And I look forward to hearing his thoughts on whatever that topic is.
Absolutely. As far as final thoughts for me, real quickly, as I noted, I'll be at Disney World. I'll be there as this show goes live. Assuming that the the SAG strike hasn't ended, I will be in Bob Iger's ear the whole time I'm there, telling him to end this nonsense. That's going to be my goal.
Good luck finding him. He's probably in a bunker somewhere.
Maybe, but it is my goal to find him and talk him out of this crazy ridiculousness that he's doing. So
He's hiding out in Hoth or Dagobah or something like that.
I know. Show yourself, Bob. Come on. Face me like a man. At any rate, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Oh, man, Zodiac, it's so good.
So good.
And the game. Oh, I love the game.
Good filmmaker. Finch.